Last Saturday, Hall of Fame trainer Todd Pletcher celebrated a tremendous win in the Stephen Foster Stakes at Churchill Downs. Mindframe winning that race. You heard that call just a short time ago here on the program. He punches his ticket to the Breeders' Cup Classic at Del Mar in November. Just hours later, Todd would learn about the passing of his longtime friend and mentor, Wayne Lukas, the legendary trainer passing away at his home in Louisville at the age of 89. Todd joins me now to remember Wayne, to look back on Mindframe, and to look ahead to his races coming up later today. Todd, I appreciate the visit, my friend.
Sure.
Very sorry for your loss of Wayne Lukas. It's a loss that resonates with so many of us here in the industry. When you hear the name Wayne Lukas, what things immediately come to mind, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, a larger-than-life individual that, sort of transcended the sport. He's, like you said, it's a personal loss, but really it's a huge loss for the entire industry, and for a man that you could argue had as much influence and impact on the sport as anyone in history.
What do you remember about the first time you met Wayne Lukas?
It was kind of one of those things. I don't know exactly when the first time I met him. One of the reasons I was able to sort of get my foot in the door with Wayne was because my dad trained quarter horses in Ruidoso, and kind of around the same time that Wayne was still in the quarter horse business. So, that would have been going back to when I was probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and but just kind of even at that age, recognizing, this is someone who does things a little bit differently, and kind of flamboyant, and even back then always, had the best looking barn, and just so I don't recall exactly the first time, but I know, knowing who he was from very early age.
Yeah, a very special person, and somebody who is certainly going to be missed in this sport. How about as a teacher, Todd? How do you describe Wayne Lukas as a teacher?
Well, I think I've kind of been reflecting a bit and going back and watching a lot of his interviews and speeches and what have you on YouTube and various outlets like that, and just the one thing that you kind of keep going back to, that you keep hearing him say, was he kind of felt like he was, I don't know if you would say destined to be a teacher or coach, but I think, I heard him say a number of times that he always felt like he kind of took that teaching mindset with him, even when he was no longer a teacher in school or a coach of a basketball team. He was still kind of had that teacher to his barn and the way that it was organized and run, and that he was always telling the exercise riders what he thought they should be doing or how they should be doing it, and teaching them different things. And the same thing with everyone else in the barn, including the assistants. He was always good to tell you what he was thinking, tell you why he was wanting to do something a certain way, and kind of have some reasoning behind it. And so, yeah, I think he was just, that was sort of who he was a coach and a teacher.
If you were to point to one or two significant lessons that you learned in your time being around Wayne Lukas before going out on your own, what were those things? What would those things be?
I don't think it was so much like one thing. I think the thing that you learned from him was that, it was everything. And, that mindset, that approach to every day of just being totally committed, totally reliable, and really focusing on every single detail, and that sort of mindset of, every detail matters, and, every detail trickles down and carries over to everyone in the barn. And so I think that, his philosophy was, the small things make the big things better. And so he was always focused on that. And I just think, most of us that work there, when you work in an environment that's organized, that's very clean and tidy, and everything has a place, and everything's in its place, that you kind of take that with you, and it makes you sort of incorporate that same philosophy and theory into your organization.
You and I talked on our Trainer Talk program years ago, the first time you ever joined me on that particular show, Todd, and it might even date back about 10 years. But there was a line that you said to me, or we discussed, that Wayne had used. Wayne had said, when referring to you and to Kieran and Dallas and Mike Maker, George Weaver, all of those disciples of his, if you will, who went on to do great things in the business, he said they were going to be good without me. Do you really believe that?
Well, I mean, I think everyone, in their own right had the ability to be successful. I think the real key is, would we have been as successful without Wayne's influence? And I think, we could all say, the answer to that is a resounding no, that he made us better. He brought out, what talent we did have, or he maybe was the reason why we were able to maintain focus and maintain dedication to it. So, I don't think there's any doubt that all the guys that you mentioned were going to be successful and going to do well, but without a doubt, Wayne Lukas was a huge influence on that.
You mentioned that you spent some time reflecting. I think all of us have done that. Is there a favorite Wayne Lukas memory or story that comes to mind when you think about your time around him, even if it was after you went out on your own?
No, I mean, there's so many. I was sharing one on the TD and Riders Room when they were interviewing me about. I remember a time he was at Belmont, and I'm not very good at remembering the years, but he was there. He came in for some big races. We were spending a few days at Belmont, and we were leaving the barn around lunchtime. He was staying at the Garden City Hotel, and I was giving him a ride back to the hotel. And we were driving back. He said, "Hey, let's stop at this Carvel ice cream store and grab a milkshake on the way back." And so we went into the store, and there's a young lady behind the counter, and he said, "Give me an extra large double chocolate milkshake." And so the girl took some vanilla ice cream, put 2 squirts of chocolate syrup into it, and handed him the shake. And he kind of politely said, that's not exactly the way I wanted it. I would like chocolate ice cream with chocolate syrup. And so she said, "I'm sorry, sir." And she went to take back the extra large milkshake that she had given him. And he said, no, give me that. I'll drink this while you make the other one. And so he's drinking that one and making him an extra large double chocolate milkshake with chocolate ice cream. And she puts a squirt of chocolate in there, and then she sort of looks over at him like, "You want that second squirt of chocolate?" And he kind of gave her with that, he kind of had, that grin that he'd have sometimes. And he kind of, nodded his head and gave her the go-ahead to put that second squirt of chocolate syrup in there. And I was thinking about it at the time, like, it was pretty cool that, he took the first milkshake and downed that one while he was waiting on the other one. But then, when I was thinking about it later on, it was kind of like, you know what, that's kind of the way Wayne lived life, right? Like he was that guy that had the double chocolate milkshake with 2 squirts, a chocolate syrup in it, and that's sort of the way he took on everything.
That's a fantastic story. Last Saturday on the program, I was reflecting upon his career with Dale Romans and Tim Wilkin in our I Ask, They Answer segment of the show. And I asked them which horses, and there were so many greats, which horses they would put on a Wayne Lukas Mount Rushmore. And that's a very difficult thing. But if you were to select, I don't know, give me 4 or 5 horses that you think would be worthy of being on a Wayne Lukas Mount Rushmore.
Well, I think interestingly, is everyone has been talking about the career that he had, but Wayne was remarkable in the fact that he basically had 2 Hall of Fame careers. He had the quarter horse Hall of Fame training career, followed by the thoroughbred training Hall of Fame career, and the one horse that he told me that he was the only horse that he ever trained that he thought would never get beaten, and that was Dash for Cash. It was a world champion quarter horse, but I think in fairness, you would have to put that horse on the Mount Rushmore. But then after that, now it gets complicated. I think you got to put Lady Secret on there. She is arguably one of the best race mares of our lifetime. Then I think you probably got to put Winning Colors on there, being a filly who won the Kentucky Derby. Serena Song sits on there somewhere. Unbelievable career. Probably the best grass horse he ever had, who won the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile when I worked for him, was Steinland. And then Gulch, a champion sprinter, Thunder Gulch, another Derby winner. I mean, the list just goes on and on. It would be hard to narrow it down to a handful, but those are just some of the many. Criminal Type, Horse of the Year, beat Sunday Silence, and Jose Santos told me the best horse he'd ever ridden. A lot. Just wow, that's an incredible list to even think about.
Yeah, it truly is. Todd Pletcher, the Hall of Famer, remembering his good friend and mentor, the late Hall of Famer D. Wayne Lukas. A very special relationship there. Todd, just as I mentioned, just hours before you learned about the passing of Wayne on Saturday afternoon, you had a chance to celebrate a victory in the Stephen Foster with Mindframe. And this is a horse that now looks like he is the horse to beat in the older horse division, looking ahead to the Breeders' Cup Classic. Talk about that effort in the Stephen Foster.
I mean, that was a loaded field, and it looked like arguably the race of the year so far with Breeders' Cup Classic winner and their Derby winner, and just a loaded field. And it was very exciting to think that Mindframe, we knew he liked the track at Churchill. He was 2 for 2 there, but one of those was an allowance race going a mile and 16, and the last one was in the Churchill Down Stakes, where he was able to win a Grade 1 going 7 furlongs. So it's just really, really special to have a horse that's capable of winning back-to-back Grade 1s from 7 furlongs, one time to the next time in a mile and an eighth race. It's pretty rare that you have ones that can do that. So it was a terrific win for Mindframe. It was a great win for Rapoli Stables and St. Elias, and great win for Constitution, who's one of my favorite stallions. Also a big win for Claiborne, who had purchased his breeding rights following the Churchill Down Stakes. So really just a tremendous win for everyone on the team.
Is it safe to say that Mindframe might be just coming into his own now?
I think that's fair to say, and especially when you think about what he did as a 3-year-old to go from a 13-length maiden debut win, going 7/8, to just getting beat in the Belmont in his 3rd lifetime start and finishing 2nd in the Haskell. And he's a May foal, so I think there's every reason to believe, and we've always felt like that he was going to be a better 4-year-old than a 3-year-old. And so far, I think that's holding true.
We are recording this conversation on Friday morning. Saturday morning is going to be super busy for you when this interview is airing, which means that by Saturday morning, we may have already watched Locke win the Suburban, which is being run Friday afternoon at Saratoga. We won't have a chance to know what those results are, obviously, at this point, Todd, but just talk about where you see Locke in his development at this point anyway.
Well, I mean, he's always been a very, very talented horse, very, a Grade 1 winner at 2. Able to win the, Cigar Mile at 3, going, obviously a mile, and then to win the Santa Anita Handicap, it's going 1.25 miles. He's a super talented horse. I think, maybe people are a little down on him after the Ali Sheba, but, I think when you really analyze that race, the Fierceness set a track record. The fastest mile is 16th they've ever run at Churchill Downs. So when you think about that, that's pretty phenomenal. But, they did it off slow fractions, of like a 48.5. And usually when track records are set, they're usually set in situations where, you have a pretty fast early pace. And so in Locke's case, he was off the pace, which was slow, and now he was trying to close into a track record-setting finish, the last part, which, it was too much to ask for in that particular situation. But, I think hopefully when this is aired, he's come back and bounced back and put together, the type of performance he's capable of.
Yeah, it could be either Locked or Antiquarian standing in the winner's circle of the Suburban Friday afternoon. Let me ask you about Fierceness for a quick second. This is a horse we just talked about, Mindframe maybe being the leader in the division. Other people will say, hold on, Todd's got that other horse over there, Fierceness. He's pretty good too.
Yeah, he's very good. And I was a little worried about the Met Mile running out of the Wilson chute. And when he drew the one hole, it got a little complicated. I don't think he fired his best shot. And, sometimes coming off of such a huge return victory like he had in the Ali Sheba, might have been a little bit of bounce factor there too as well. But he had a dynamite breeze this morning. He's targeting the Whitney, and just a super talented horse. He likes Saratoga. He broke his maiden here and won the Jim Dandy and the Travers. So we're looking forward to the Whitney.
I was thinking about this bizarro world that we're living in now, Todd, because, we're so used to seeing you with horses, maybe many starters in the Kentucky Derby, and that streak of yours came to an end earlier this season without having a starter in the race. And now here we are talking about all these top older horses, and the cupboard is very full for Todd Pletcher on that side of things. It does seem like we're living in a bizarro world when you look at it that way.
Yeah, I was saying 21 years down the tubes for the Kentucky Derby, but and I was worried about that going into the winter and the spring. I kept saying, man, we're very fortunate to have some really good older horses, and I'm hoping some of our 3-year-olds will step up, but it just it wasn't meant to be. So we're blessed to have some of the older horses we have, and we're hoping that the current crop of 2-year-olds we have step up, and hopefully can get us back to the Derby next year.
Well, Todd, here's the hoping that 21 years from now in 2046, you and I can still be sitting here talking about that next streak and trying to continue another 21 years.
That'd be awesome.
All right, my friend. All the best coming up here on Saturday. Thank you so much for remembering Wayne with me. That was spectacular, and really appreciate the time as always.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Todd Pletcher here on HRRN. I did mention that we won't know the results of the Suburban because we recorded that on Friday morning, but one person who can shed a little light on that for us is jockey Jose Ortiz, who has been red hot of late. He rode Locked in yesterday's Suburban, and he will talk about that coming up next. This is the Equine Forum presented by Twin Spires on HRRN.